And I see we're live. I am on the show, not with Bombos Charles Demetriou, but with Cass Midgley of everyone's agnostic fame.
Yeah, that's me. We were going to say that Bombos had a hard night, and this is
he did have a hard night.
This is a hungover. Oh, he relapsed into drug addiction, and this is
if this is what it looks like on the back end. And we're going to discuss a topic that I have no clue how we're going to get through it, but I knew how I'd get through it with Bombos, and that is the trap of authenticity. And we're going to do that where Cass Midgley?
On Everyone's Agnostic. No,
Everyone's Agnostic. You've done a few hundred.
Let's just have it.
A wonderful
chaos.
I love it. Bye. See you in a sec.
I love that bass line.
I love it. And I love what you did with the song. As I keep telling everybody, if you've not listened to the podcast version, then Cass is the singer and the instrument player, and he did the whole
No,
setup.
Not the instrument player. That's your soundtrack. That's all I did was put music or put words in.
But you layered over in different ways to make it sound far more intricate than it was, didn't you? I mean,
no.
At least okay, you sang over yourself. Like, let's give yourself some credit.
There's layers of vocals.
Yeah, you did different channels.
Yeah, that's me. I edit the podcast, and I wrote that song for the podcast, and that's me.
So for everyone who's wondering what happened to Bombos, he is in bed with a very high temperature. He got tested, and we're going to see what the results come back. And Cass, who I actually just last week said, Cass, should Bombos find work, would you be open to jumping in and just
more like 2 days ago?
Okay. Would you be open? Little did I know then that this day would actually come much sooner. So yes. And Cass, for me, in some strange way, of course, it's beautiful to have you because there is a feeling like you're part of me putting in the joy into this thing. Because as you know, I was on your show for the people that haven't heard it.
Yeah, years ago. Yeah, you were on my show. It was a great show. You were a great guest. And you just like you do on this show, you spun things then in a way where I was like, oh, this guy's perspective is totally unique, and he's proud of it, or at least he's like, because like you were so sure of yourself. I was like, what you're saying is pretty avant-garde, and he's like, oh no, this is it.
I got a sect of one. I believe myself.
I love that. I love that. And you ruffled some feathers in some of my listeners. You ruffled my feathers a little bit because I was like, all right, are you just a self-help guru? I didn't know what to think of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember the one comment that was said to the post on your show was that one woman who said, Cass, don't believe him. Don't believe him. You know,
something like that. Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. It was like, don't trust that guy. Like, I don't know what there is not to trust, right? I'm driving there. Yeah.
I was at the time, I was a little bit new, excuse me, to the type of thinking that, up is down and down is up and paradox and all of that. And you came at that with like, you just turned everything upside down. And I just happened to be ready enough for it to,
oh, wow.
When the student is ready, the teacher arrives, or as Jesus said, let those who have ears to hear, hear. And I had ears that day because I was pulled in, and then I read your book, and I read your second book, and I'm a fan.
Well, thank you.
I want to say as a disclaimer up front to the listeners, because I edit the show on the podcast and I've done 136 episodes, I'm very familiar with you and Bombos and what you guys offer. And you guys are 20 times more evolved as a human being than I am. So,
come on.
No, the cool thing about listening to somebody is that when you because there's the world of podcasts is absolutely saturated, right?
Yeah.
There's billions. There's 1,000 podcasts for every little
segment.
niche subject. For sewing, you got 20,000 podcasts just for showing.
Yeah.
So the competition is tough, and so I think what people do is when they hear somebody that has something that they don't, right?
Yeah.
The listener comes away and goes, I can learn from this person. I can learn from this person. And that's what you guys do for me, even as an editor. I learn something every show, and I'm a better person after every show. And
that's beautiful. Thank you.
So you have a lot to offer.
Well,
So
I mean, I felt the same, by the way. Just if we're going to masturbate one another to begin, then I'll start as well. But, when you edited the show with the love and the care that you did, that I was on, like, it showed a depth of kind of understanding of who I was, and there was a love in it that I felt immediately. And I don't know, I think you probably found it a little bit weird, because I'd call you up afterwards randomly to say hello and just chat. Like, what does this guy want? And, I don't know how it was for you, but
not at all weird. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of felt very, just grateful. I always find when there's people just working from love, you feel it, like you just know it. And then you just want to connect to it, and just whatever it is just say, I'm thinking about you. Yeah. It doesn't even need to be any big drawn out thing. And to find an excuse that we could even work together was just joyous for me. Just, hey, how do I find a way? And I don't know, because at that time, I didn't even have a podcast in my head. That was just, and you were active. I mean, for those that are listening, your podcast has been downloaded over 500,000 times. I mean, that's a lot of listening. Yeah. So, and it's kind of funny, because for those that aren't aware of your show, it's called Everyone's Agnostic. And it's really quite like, I listened back to 1 or 2 of your episodes, by the way, last week, just without telling you. And you layer on a strong sense of, it's not, when it comes to religion, some people are skeptical. You're like, I would call you a hater.
Yeah.
So it was funny for me to listen to it, because I'm like, I know you in so loving a way that when it came to, and I know you said you evolved through your own podcast, where you made more and more peace with it, which is probably why you ended it, because at some point you didn't have there was no more to fight. You're like, hey, I've been through this. I know the game already. I'm done. I'm moving on. So yeah. But for those that haven't listened to Everyone's Agnostic, I know Bolalang, who you're obviously aware of, he clearly has a lot of issues with religion. So Bolalang, if you do want to see or hear Cass's work, then you can check out Everyone's Agnostic, and you'll see a lot of stuff there.
Yeah. Do you remember which one of my episodes is with you and Bombos?
I don't remember what the number was. Are you talking about the one we did earlier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't even remember what our subject was on that one. Yeah.
Probably just me and my hatred for religion.
Probably. I would change the titles. I think I've gotten a bit more ballsy with the titles lately. Like before, I would try to be a little bit more mellow in the middle. And now I'm like, I hate religion with Cass Midgley. That pulls the viewers in. Today is the trap of authenticity. And this topic hit me when I started seeing people in social media arguing with one another that they weren't being authentic. So I had, that was only one instance of it. I've had so many instances in my life where people have said to me, hey, you're not being authentic, or so they've used the idea of authenticity as a sort of object, a judgment, gotcha on other people, where at that moment they themselves weren't being authentic. And I've always thought the irony that you're now judging someone for exactly the thing that you're not being. And that's been something that's gnawed at me for years. And there's trainings on authenticity. And then even this I would call it the delusion that authenticity is a great to be as a leader. And not that it isn't also great, but when it becomes a belief, then all of a sudden people they lose themselves, and they don't understand that sometimes, you can't be authentic because there's an HR manager and you'll be sued for millions of dollars. You can't always be authentic. And that's the absurdity that I've found in life, is that once we're dogmatic about what one should be, then there's so much loading that comes with it.
Yeah, it's almost automatic that so if I'm going to set a goal to be personally authentic,
yeah,
then I've already I'm already not authentic, because authentic by definition should be I'm relaxed. I'm not even shooting for authenticity. I'm literally shooting for nothing. I'm just being.
Yeah.
That's authenticity. So the moment I say I got to be authentic, I've forfeited. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's also a weird thing that where authenticity and vulnerability, because what I often see happen is that the idea of authenticity can be, oh, you're not being vulnerable as well. So the authentic is connected to vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And then in that way, the most vulnerable thing a person can do is maybe yell at you. Like that could be the most vulnerable thing that they do. Because that for them is so out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Where for another person, the most vulnerable thing they might be able to do is cry or share what's really going on in their minds.
Yeah.
And that's kind of this weird, when I see this authenticity training, it always kind of I understand that it has
training
value
for it.
Oh yeah. Are you kidding me? Do a search on Google authenticity training and you'll, it'll and that's this weird, I don't know. I can share like one instance where it really hit me is that I'm always wondering, it's the chicken and the egg. Is a person being the way they're being because of how I'm behaving? Am I creating that reality, or is that who they are all the time? Because a lot of times we want to blame them for our behavior.
100%. That happens. See, that's the detour that I was going to take this on. It's funny that you should say that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I do want to say this, and this is what comes to mind and I listened to Mark Maron's podcast called WTF, and he just admitted the other day he had a guy on who was I forget his name, Michael K. Thompson, maybe, I don't know, but he's a black actor from The Wire, and is a very popular character. And then he went on to do something in Lovecraft County, but he's black, and he's very black as far as his ebonics. I mean, the way he talks, it was very black. I'm sure that's racist, but Mark, not only did he start kind of talking a little bit more in that tone and attitude, but he admitted it on air. That and it's true. If I get done watching a 2-hour movie where everybody on the show was British, the first words out of my mouth when I'm done watching the movie are going to be British. I mean, it's going to be that British accent. So we do mirror and model and mimic that which we're around, and that's just human nature, and there's no way to measure that. But as far as am I influenced by the people that I'm with, and are they influenced by me? Absolutely. How can you measure that? There's no way. But we have to admit that it happens. And then when something is done that one feels shame about, that's when they're going to look around and say, okay, who can I blame this on? Because in order for me to look inside and do the work that it takes to figure out why I did that and how to not ever do it again, to avoid that work and that pain, I need to find a scapegoat. And so it's very common to find.
Slow that one down a bit, because you took one. You started on one step, and I had you, and then you jumped to the next one.
Yeah.
So you're pointing out that if you have shame around a behavior, right? If you have an example, of course, I'd love to hear something.
Well, let's just say that a person was in a codependent relationship for years.
Okay.
And they ended up really kind of forfeiting their own agency to support this other person's life. The other person was kind of an alpha, and they became a beta or whatever. I hate those terms, but it gets my point across. And they forfeited their dreams, and they forfeited their desires for years and years and years. And finally, till it just got to the person was sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? I mean, there's a point where the pain of this is more than the pain of that. And so you say, I'm out, or you blow up, or and then from there, I'm saying at that point, the beta would easily blame the alpha for suppressing them, whereas it takes two to tango, really, right?
Yeah, and the codependent, you're kind of pointing out that typical, the one who suppresses and the aggressor and the victim, right? That typical triangle that, of course, everyone's always pointing out.
Right. Wow. It's just an example of blaming someone else for their behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, which takes me back to the story where I spent a lot of time with a friend, and the friend was always very analytical. So they weren't really embodied. They would talk about the feelings, but they weren't embodying the feelings they were talking about. I didn't experience them that way, at least. And then that same friend would start to point out that I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't being vulnerable with them. And that was funny because, that trust isn't easy because, obviously you've heard all of my background. So if I'm going to go into a relationship and I'm going to be vulnerable, there is a degree of fear because, I remember at the table when I was in 8th grade and I was crying and Dad, he was yelling at me for crying and saying I was manipulating him. So in some ways there is a trauma there of, if I'm going to be fully vulnerable with you, I've got to trust that you're going to meet me there. And I've often not been met there. In fact, even this individual wouldn't have met me there because they would have allowed my vulnerability to be a tool for them to make a point, right? Which is the humor, is like, I need you to be vulnerable so I can prove the thing that I wanted to about what I think of you. That's always there. So what ended up happening is, and I was so aware of it that I just didn't, I was present, but I wasn't being fully vulnerable. And then at one point, they said it so many times that I flipped and I said, be the thing you want me to be. If you want me to be that, then look in my eyes and tell me how you feel about me. Tell me what it is you're missing and why that's important to you. Show me part of you and let me connect with you there, instead of accusing me of not being there and not actually even trust, where you don't even allow me to trust you will meet me there.
Yeah. So it was easy, or not easy, but it was the choice they made, that you picked up on that there's something else going on here. Yeah. There's something that is driving this energy that you're having towards me right now. And I think that you're not telling me something. So I think that you're not being authentic. I think you're not being vulnerable. And maybe if we could start there, then I could understand better as to what's driving your accusation.
Yeah. And I think, and I see that it was nice that you used the word codependency, because in a way I see that as a perfect word here, because what I see often happens is that it's the blind need or the want, and then we blame the other person for what they're not giving us. And then all of a sudden it becomes a negative reinforcing loop, because you're not giving me what I need, but I'm not giving you the thing I'm accusing you of me not receiving.
Right. Of withholding.
Of withholding. And I think that authenticity game is why I really see it's a trap. Either, and I think, we use the title authenticity, but it could also really go into vulnerability as well, because to some degree, if people are being authentic, usually there's a certain degree of vulnerability in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because they're not hiding anything. That's kind of the definition, right, of authentic, is that they're bearing, they don't have any masks on. This is what you see is what you get. So that's that's vulnerable. That's naked.
Yeah. And I know that of you, by the way, from listening to your podcast.
Yeah, very.
Like you are from the people that I would hear, and of course I laughed at the dislike of religion in your life, but for me there's an aspect which goes beyond that, which is, all the suppression through all the years actually came out for me through your podcast, is like, now I get to say everything I wasn't able to say the last years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for me, my faith, my religion was of the nature. I was a very devout radical. So when we talk about the radicalization, that's kind of a hot word right now with QAnon.
Yeah.
People they went from just being, like cared about their country to radicalized in a nationalistic way that is unhealthy. And where my faith, I believe there's people out there that have healthy faith, that have faith that benefits them and the world and doesn't hurt anybody and doesn't make them an asshole.
Yeah.
My faith was of the nature of radicalization that robbed me of my agency. I was not to trust my own heart and mind. I was not to think for myself. I had been bought with a price. I was a slave to Jesus, literally. I mean, that's the language of the Bible. And so you were to give up your life for his, take up your cross and follow him. And so there was a lot of resentment, and there was, as far as once I figured out I'd been duped.
Yeah.
Then there's that embarrassment of like, I can't believe I fell for this. And then I've lost the first 40 years of my life that I'll never get back. So yeah, there was a lot of angst in there. But I will say, going back to like how you experienced me as an authentic person and kind of that metaphor of nakedness, that I almost err on the side of oversharing, which is,
I know.
So that's maybe what you were talking about, as far as the spectrum of authenticity, has a shadow side.
Yeah. And that's what I think happens in a way as well. Like, there's also this idea that you have to bear all, and if it's not all, it's not authentic.
Right. So I've been accused of lacking tact.
Yes.
And that's what you're talking about a little bit. Since my name is Cass, and it's a nickname, but I've had it my whole life since I was born. But some people call me Crass or Casshole.
I can hear that one, Casshole. That's beautiful.
And so there is that nature of shock jock. I mean, like, I want to be the center of attention a lot of times, or historically. And so if I'm at a party, I'm just going to push the envelope because let's get this party started or something. Just some kind of attitude of, and a drive. I will say this: there's something, and I haven't really ever thought about this, which this will be good. This will be something I journal about later. But I know that I'm sick and tired so often of disingenuousness.
Yeah.
That the culture is a bunch of liars and masks and fakes and posers. And so I get so mad at that I swing to the other extreme to try to bust out of that straitjacket and help others bust out of it. In fact, there's a phrase that comes from an author, David Dark, who wrote several books, but there's a phrase that he coined called expanding the talkaboutable.
Yeah, I love that phrase. By the way, I wrote that down because I love when you said it to me, and I wanted to do a show on that because I thought it was such a great topic.
Well, and this in itself is healthy. I mean, we're talking about shadow sides and stuff as well, but his version is very healthy, and that is that when we take things off the table that are forbidden, taboo, can't talk about it, mum's the word, zip it or whatever. And of course, there's a lot of places where that's unhealthy. Like, for example, grief. We're learning now that the grief process is best when we talk about the dead one. We talk about the thing or whatever. Whereas years ago we were taught, don't think about it, don't cry, don't feel that, you don't feel into those emotions. Just buckle up and put a smile on your face and move the fuck on or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're learning that was, let's talk about it. And so we're expanding the talk aboutable. Another way is sex education, that we're afraid to talk to our kids because it's embarrassing. The parents are like, I don't want to say the word penis and vagina in front of my kids, And so, but let's expand the talk aboutable and they'll have a healthier sex life. They're less likely to have an unwanted pregnancy. And the very reason that you don't want to talk to them is that you're afraid of an unwanted pregnancy. So, expanding the talk aboutable. And anyway, where I was going with that was that I err on the side of too much. And I have learned to do what you're talking about. And that is, there's a time and place. Duh.
Well, I think there's also you can be authentic without being crass. I mean, how I coped, and you probably were not all that different because I coped, of course, by jokes. So I would notice things at a very young age, and because I felt so uncomfortable, and I must say, at that age didn't want to be I would equated not saying what I was feeling as not being genuine, and that was something I never really wanted to be my whole life. So the way I got out of it or trick the system, let's say, was by telling jokes, by making a snide remark here. Oh yeah, I see you're totally over it, or whatever the thing would have been that was like obvious to everyone.
Sarcasm.
But this the sarcastic remark, and of course, Mom called me the shit stirrer because she always thought I was doing that to provoke, but in some ways I was doing it to release the pressure in my brain, because having a high level of empathy and not being able to place it wasn't easy. When you see everything and no one's talking about it, you're like, I can't allow this not to be like, come on. I'm it's not, everyone sees it. That's the feeling. And I'm sure you had a similar experience.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Very much.
Yeah.
So I want to go back and talk about this thing that, the kind of the blame thing that happens. I read something this week, and this was just a tweet. It was a thread of tweets by a guy, and he happened to be a gay man, and he was making some observations about the heterosexual world that bewildered him. So he was kind of coming from this, hey, help me understand something, guys. This really seems weird to me, naivete.
Yeah, that I got it.
But what he was saying was, it just really seems strange to me that you straight guys have this, there's this thing called modesty culture, where you expect the woman to dress modestly, so that you think more of her when you think less of her in accordance to the clothes she has. The less clothes she has, the less you think of her. But there's also this thing to where you're afraid of. It seems like you're afraid of your own lusts. You're afraid of your own bodies, or you're afraid of your own self-control, because you're saying, well, you're making me think dirty thoughts about you, as in you're blaming
her. The other one for how they make you feel.
Yeah, right. So, and then he went on to say, and I'll try to phrase this as well as he did, and because there were some powerful words he used. He said, but when you blame a person or the way they dress for your own bad behavior, or how they make you feel badly or whatever, then you resent that person because they're the source.
Yeah.
And so your judge, jury, and verdict is like, you are guilty of how I'm feeling, not me.
Yeah.
You are.
Sure.
And once you've deemed somebody guilty, then violence is the next step.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put you in jail, or I'm going to execute you, or whatever.
You feel justified in whatever you do.
Yeah, it's justified. So what he said was, so now you want to assault her. And he said, modesty culture equals rape culture.
Wow.
Because they want the power back, right? We've always heard that rape's about power.
Yeah.
And when we talk about giving people too much power over our emotions, that's exactly what he's done, right?
Yeah.
He's given her the power.
Exactly.
To pull his strings.
Yeah.
And now he's angry at her because she has inadvertently and unbeknownst to her robbed his agency. And so now he's going to get the power back by raping her. And I obviously that's all metaphorical kind of. I mean, I might imagine it has happened, but always in the subconscious of these fucking rapists. But what I wanted to say
I think what you're speaking to is something really powerful and obviously connected to the religious suppression you've also had on your show, I know, over and over again, is that whatever you're suppressing in the other person will come out in these contorted ways.
Yep.
So the show I heard that I told you I was listening to was the one where you mentioned how shame was very much attached to sex in your life, till the point till today that you say, I haven't detached from that because it's so embedded in how you were indoctrinated within the church.
Yeah. And it's not just within the church. I say that's Western culture because Western culture was so shaped by the church. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. But what does that come? I mean, where I went with that was in our relationships, when we blame a person for our own behavior or feelings, we justify resentment and bitterness and
it's a belief that then creates the reality, because now they're the ones that are the bad ones.
And it infects the relationship
clearly
in a way that and here's the thing about the nature of this is that that party which you're scapegoating, which you're blaming,
Yeah.
often are unbeknownst. I mean, they're completely they don't. So the next time that you come across as like snide and bitter and jabbing and you know, you're attacking them when they could be your spouse, they could be your friend.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, where's this coming from? Because you didn't know that your blouse made him think that, or you didn't know that your alpha nature had been steamrolling them for 30 years.
Yeah.
This is a little close to home, but you know, I'm attuned to this because if a person wants to be authentic, a person wants to be present without any of this funk in the room,
Yeah.
you know, that's been created by this blame game, then there's a phrase in the 32 Declarations of Healthy Adulthood by David Rico, Dr. David Rico. One of the things, as a side note, Andy, you know, we'd mentioned briefly, was that my agency was hijacked and my development was arrested by Christianity. And so I had a lot of maturing and maturation to focus on when it came to, you know, growing up and behaving and thinking like an adult.
Yeah.
Because Christianity is a celestial God that takes over from you. I mean, a celestial parent that takes over from your biological parents. And so you're stunted. You never grow up. You're never forced to get your own apartment, so to speak, you know. And so by leaving Christianity, I found myself stunted. And so I really focused on this book, The Healthy Adulthood by David Rico. And one of the declarations, which is what I'm getting to in the context of this conversation, is take full responsibility for the shape your life has taken. And so you're not off the hook now. You're on the hook.
So slow down. I want to like savor this one.
All right, let me say it again. I accept full responsibility for the shape my life has taken. And I recited that thousands of times over the last 4 years until it was a part of my DNA. And there's all the declarations are just removing responsibility from other people and bringing it home.
So I'd love to just to touch on this, just because. So I was asked to do a course on communications because I've done so much work in it over the years and I've developed so many models. I thought, and then so I started to say I need to come up with core principles, basically the guide, because if you don't have the core principles, you're still just learning a skill. And yes, the skill is important, but the core principle was, and this is the phrasing I use today on this exact topic: how much responsibility are you ready to take in this relationship? Because you can take just the amount of responsibility that your ego is comfortable with, or you can leave your ego at the door, and then we get back into, by the way, the vulnerability discussion. Because what we're really saying is, to what degree are you going to allow yourself to be seen by the other so that they can actually meet you? And the scary thing in it is that they might say, screw you, but you've taken full responsibility in that relationship.
Yeah.
And so I use the word responsibility as you just stated it, because I said, how can I explain to somebody there's always a level of responsibility that you can take that you may not be willing to, and then I can't judge whether they're using the right amount or not. That's their judgment. But because you could also say, and this is what, getting back to the whole trap of vulnerability, in some cases, it'll be better that they're not vulnerable because the counterparty isn't willing to meet them anywhere. So to do it as a self-mutilation is also crazy, right?
You lost me.
So imagine this: if the other party has no intention of meeting you, and they've shown it over and over and over again, and you have the false belief that being vulnerable is always good, then
it's always going to win this person back to me.
Or it goes in the codependent thing you were kind of discussing. I'm going to be vulnerable because by being vulnerable, they might meet me. If I'm just vulnerable, I'm not being vulnerable enough. If I'm more vulnerable, they might find me. If I'm more vulnerable, they might find me. But at some point, it becomes the clarity that that person never wanted to meet you.
Yeah. So save yourself some time
and move on.
Yeah.
When I cried to my dad at the table and said, when he asked me, and I think you know the story, when I was at the table and he said, Andy, what do you want from me? It was like a really open, he gave me the impression he really wanted the answer to that question. And I
You
said,
said no, you want to be like other dads or
I want
something.
you to be like this other dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was my friend Billy J. And
Billy
Billy
J's
J.
dad. Be like
And Billy
him.
J's dad was the coach of the baseball team.
And
We
that's
saw him
gotta
a lot,
sting. That
you know,
stung.
and so it stung so bad, but it was the most honest, pure thing. And I
Yeah.
trusted that he would receive it in a way that it wasn't intended to hurt him. It certainly wasn't from my mouth. I was honest because he really wanted to know, I thought.
Oh, I've done that so much. Yeah.
And that was when it turned on me. And then he went into the rage and threw me out of the house. We didn't talk for whatever, however many years after that. That was the first time.
So to quote another Jesus phrase, there's
Yeah.
a lot of adages, axioms, idioms in the
Yeah.
culture that are come from Jesus's mouth, but he would call that casting pearls before swine.
Casting pearls before swine.
Yeah, and he goes on to say that the swine don't give a rat's ass that that's valuable gemstone, and in fact they'll get mad and charge you because if they try to eat it, it's not good, and then they'll be mad at you.
Yeah, but this is again another trap, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, but if you believe that and you choose not to be vulnerable because of it, then also you're creating your reality. So you're kind of living this fine line of, I'm going to be vulnerable, but I can't expect that person will meet me because I don't know if that's the thing that they're capable of.
Right. And I think what we can say to ourselves as far as people that want to know how to navigate relationships is that, yeah, you're assessing that person and they are on that spectrum. And if they're that far spectrum to where they're not interested, they're not listening, and even if you were really authentic, it wouldn't change anything. You got to pick that up and behave accordingly. But there's those people that are right in the middle where there is a place where you owe them the benefit of the doubt. No, you don't owe them. I hate that word, but if you give them the benefit, you're tempted and you're moving towards giving them the benefit of the doubt of like, I'm going to take a chance because vulnerability is risky.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to open up to them in hopes that they'll respond. And I know that they may not, or they may. That's my risk. And I think there's relationships that are worth that too.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. By the way, we have a few messages that have come in, so I'll put them up. Jessica has said, I learned this lately. Vulnerability, the ability to change shape under pressure. Authenticity and vulnerability feel the same in this context.
The ability to change shape under pressure?
Yeah, the ability to change shape under pressure. It's funny. Yeah,
circumstances are requiring something of you that you don't seem to have, but if you adapt quick enough, then you might be able to salvage this moment.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. That's a hard one for me. I always see vulnerability as something going away. So I guess that would be maybe the change under pressure that she's pointing at. Yeah. Well, I would say this. If I say what vulnerability is, okay, let's go to how, like, the real option, the real thing. So you say something that triggers me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in a way, if I navigate around that trigger in my response to you, you feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I'm unable to tap into what's really going on and share it with you, the less we stay in connection.
Okay, so what I hear there is that, and you do this all the time with Bambus or anybody else, and I appreciate it because I feel it too, and I've never seen anybody address it so quickly and honestly as you guys do, and that is you smell the moment he becomes defensive.
Yeah.
Or anybody for that matter.
We actually don't call it defensive anymore. We actually are embracing that it's trauma. It's a really beautiful shift, by the way, just to name it. So we're naming it trauma because it's a trauma response now.
Okay, so I say to you, Andy, I've watched the way that you treat Ronnie, and I think you're an asshole.
Yeah.
And that triggers you, and then you say something what we would previously call defensive, but traumatic or coming from trauma.
Well, I would say, so by the way, I have been told by several people that I treat Ronnie horribly. So just FYI, it isn't that and it was funny because I was on a trip with like 18 people, something I never really would do, but it just happened.
Yeah.
And then one of the people came back and said to me, Andy, just so you know, there's this talk going around and people, they do the people thing. They're just talking and they think that, you're not really treating Ronnie well. So I'm sitting there with Ronnie as we're sitting like together. And then we look at each other and then we burst out into laughter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because what but sorry, in answer to your question, this wasn't the point, but I just thought it was a funny segue.
Yeah.
I would say that whenever anyone says something, I'm not interested in what they said. I'm interested in why they said it. And the vulnerability would come from me. And that, if someone said something that really hurt me, then I'm just feeling into it as we speak, because the Ronnie thing doesn't hurt me, to be honest with you. I kind of just laugh at it. But if there's something that really hurt me, I would say that hurts. I would acknowledge the pain, and then I'd say, what makes it you say that? That would be what I'd do.
Okay, but I think what the example you were given, I want to switch the tables where you're not the let's say that you're not the one that's been triggered, but you're the one that says something to somebody and they've been triggered.
Okay.
And you can tell, this is what I heard you say, you can tell from their response whether they're being authentic or not.
Nice. Okay, I don't like you using the word authentic. So yes, but I love what you're saying. So what you're telling me is, am I judging them based on the level of authenticity? No, I wouldn't want to say that. But what I would say is, do I feel that I see them in their response? It would be far more of an energy.
Yeah.
And I would hate to think that I would sit there, because like I told you before, I sat next to Bambos. Bambos has been having these moments when he'll just go kind of quiet. And I said, I don't know what the phrasing I would use. You've gone.
Are you with us?
Are you with us or something? But what I wasn't embracing that moment was the fact that he was having a trauma response. And what I would say is, I observe that there's something there that I'm not connecting to, but as soon as I apply a judgment to it, I'm a dick. So the difference is just saying, I don't see you, and I don't see you. What's
I see you protecting yourself right now.
I wouldn't say that, because that would also push them away. So I wouldn't want to force anybody, because again.
You can say it out loud. But
I want to be delicate with people, because I don't know if they've been raped or assaulted, or I don't know if I'm the visual of me is triggering something so deep in them. And the only way I'll find that out is if I'm really, really open to allow everything to unfold. So that's what
they feel safe.
They have to. Yeah. And they also have to feel seen. I mean, if someone judges me, they also have to feel seen in that judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the vulnerability, I think it goes back to the beginning when we were speaking about ego, is that the more ego you have, the more things you have to defend, and the less capable you are of actually being vulnerable. If someone says something that triggers you, it's less likely you're going to ask a question like, what makes you say that? Mm-hmm. In a way that's very open, not in a way that forces the other person to defend what they've said, but it's inquiring, what is it? And I think the vulnerability is if I was to put it as a measurement, it would be the degree to which you're willing to allow yourself to be seen, to see and be seen without needing to defend.
Yep.
Because at one level, once a defense comes in, all of the mechanisms of coping come in, and then you see the mask, or whatever the terms you want to use to. So the whole idea is, and that's why I always say, if anyone says anything about you, then do not defend. Just say, hey, I agree, or if they say you're a pedophile, it's hard to agree, but say, wow, that's kind of hard to hear. What makes you say it? At least be open to what it is they might be noticing.
Yeah. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to pull something off the wall.
Oh, I love it. Please. And I'll just mention to you, Bowl Along. Yes, Cass's show is called Everyone's Agnostic, but it's apostrophe S. It's not everyone is, but everyone's agnostic. That's it for Cass. And Magda, thank you for listening. I love you.
It was episode 89 too, the one that I did with you guys.
Episode 89. Do you remember what the title was? I think it might have had something to do with your dad as well.
Leaving the past behind.
Oh, that wouldn't be a good one. I would say I Hate the Church. That's how I'd rename it, just to get more viewership.
So my daughter is a graphic design artist.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see if I can.
I love this.
I can't find where. This is. I'm sorry. Okay.
No, please do what you do. I'll see you.
Okay. So this one says, I accept full responsibility for the shape my life has taken. So she took these 32 declarations and she made some graphics out of them in this little frame thing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
This one says, I acknowledge the reality I acknowledge that reality is not obligated to me. It remains unaffected by my wishes or rights.
Wow.
And then the last one is, until I see another's behavior with compassion, I have not understood it.
Wow.
So those are 3 out of the 32 that were life changing for me. But going back to what you were saying, I was thinking about responsibility, and I think all of these kind of can bleed over into this a similar concept as far as vulnerability, authenticity, and responsibility.
Mm.
And one of the catchphrase from my show that I coined early on was "Say yes to what is."
Yeah,
and it's kind of this phrase, as far as I see, that reality is not obligated to me,
Yeah.
And so I'd like to hear from you. And I just want to say, before we get too deep into this, that this is 2 straight white guys talking. So we are the most privileged class
Totally.
human being on the food chain. And so we don't understand victimization very much, because there's hardly any victimization in my life.
Yeah.
Like, no, I have no PTSD. I got bullied one time in elementary school, but I wasn't traumatized,
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to relate to, there was no alcoholism in my family, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
So I really want to tread lightly as I go down this path.
Mm.
But the thing that I think, especially white males, say a lot, as far as the times, how do we take responsibility for something that was done to us? I'm asking you to take full responsibility for the shape your life has taken. Well, you were raped at an age or whatever,
Yeah.
to where that was imposed on you. You were not responsible for that.
Yeah.
And you really were a victim. Now how do I, because that, let's say, and I've heard you guys say this on the show before, that a woman that has trauma around sexuality is going to have trouble being present in the act of sexuality from there on, unless she's done a lot of work and somehow taking.
Well, I mean, let's just say we don't state it as a fact. That's just been an experience that both of us have had. Yes.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But it's going to impact their ability to be authentic. That's what I'm saying. It's like
well, no. Let's say that. Because now I think authentic, by you going there, you create a conundrum that I don't want to create.
Okay.
I would say it has nothing to do with authenticity. It has an opportunity. They've lost connection with themselves. Like, they don't even have that. So it's not about authenticity. It's about a trauma response. So in that way, it's not you could say, in some level, right, the degree to which one experiences trauma or fear, anxiety, is also the degree to which they're able to be vulnerable. Because it's easy. I always laugh when I told Ronnie this. Yeah, or not be. But I told Ronnie, like, it's so effing easy for, like, getting to your point, for the white guy has enough money to be comfortable. He succeeded. He has absolutely no liability in being vulnerable, because in that way, it's like, what's going to happen to him, right? Like, who's going to judge? But I laughingly said, but for Ronnie, she has a much more greater challenge to be vulnerable, because it's already projected onto her that women can be irrational, they can be impulsive. So in some ways, the stereotype, if you fulfill pieces of it, you'll then be categorized, and then you will have consequences for it. So it's much easier, as white men writing books. White men can write books because they've got time and money, right? It's an expensive venture, so others can't, or don't have the opportunity as easily, and that's just sort of the thing I've seen, is that that there's a degree to which being truly vulnerable in public, which is admirable, is easier for some classes.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
yeah,
and
they extol it as if, look at me, I just live it, and I'm like, hey, I see it as a luxury, and I understand there may be consequences. Clearly, my family listens every so often and calls me afterwards and says, why did you say that? But other than that, that's about as bad as it gets.
Well, that's the naivete of the privileged, is that since everything has come so easily for me, I just assume it's easy for everybody. but I'm ignoring that the world was designed by me, white men, for me, you know.
Yeah, but I think that could also, I mean, I have a trouble with that somehow as well, because in a way, everybody experiences the world as they experience it. So I can't project on everyone's experience of the world. I can say that for me, I haven't had to deal with certain issues that other people have had to deal with, which
But
is,
that's self-awareness. I was talking about the naivete of somebody that would say that.
oh, good. Because I was almost worried, like, oh shit, what if we're like saying that everyone would say that, and then I'd be like, oh
No, I'm
no,
saying that's a non-self-aware person, or even
wow,
others aware. That's a non-empathetic person
yeah.
that says, "Well, it was easy for me. You should be able to do it." I mean, that's
Yeah, I've
that's
noticed that.
bigotry.
I've noticed that a lot when I saw the in the U.S. when there was the elections going on, and everyone was talking. Well, it never came easy to me, and then I realized that it really probably didn't come easy to them. Right? They worked really hard, but they never took into account the advantages that they had. In there's that. I'm sure you've seen it. That beautiful video on privilege where the man lines everyone up in a football stadium. Have you ever seen this video? He lines everyone up and he says, take one step forward every time this hasn't happened to you.
Oh,
I
yeah.
came from a family where my parents weren't divorced, right? And
Yeah.
then they get to take one step forward. I never had to worry. I never didn't have enough money for food. They take another step forward. I never, no one in my family has ever gone to jail. They take another. So then all of these things. So then you've got everybody that's basically towards the end of the finish line. And then they said, now start.
Yeah, and you blow the gun, start the race, and then
and then they win, and then they win, and just like I won, without as if like it was only based on your ability, right?
Yeah. So I had something. The thing about privilege. Oh shit!
By the way, what made you segue to privilege? Not that it's cool to go there, but what made that the vulnerability and the authenticity subject progressed in this direction? Because I'm sure you had a connection there.
Well, I'm looking for. I was mostly about responsibility, and I take full responsibility for the shape my life has taken. Well, what do you say to somebody who good chunks of their lives of the evil in their lives was imposed on them?
Oh, wow.
And how are they supposed to take responsibility for the shape their life has taken when they were victimized on so many fronts and so many times? And yet I do think that somehow, and I, again, speaking from a place of privilege, but I think somehow it could benefit them and be important that they figure out a way to not only take responsibility, but at least at minimal, stop blaming that person, the rapist in this case.
Yeah. But you're talking about heightening levels of consciousness. I mean, for the show, the show is very much inviting all of the trauma on, because holding space for the trauma is actually a great step for people to overcome it. And you're editing the show, so I always laugh that 50% of the people that come on don't really want to be here. I mean, and that's really true. Like, these aren't people that are saying, "Hey, I want to tell my story." Yeah, they're reluctant, and I think the beauty for me is that when you talk about privilege, and I think the privilege, if I look at it, the privilege is that I've had the opportunity to make peace with a lot of my own demons, so I can make peace or support others who haven't made peace with those same demons, and that same title of the book, The Wounded Healer, and such. But I guess this is a fine line, and it gets into a whole topic. We actually have a show coming up called "I Helped a Homeless Man Off the Street," and the thing that fascinated me on that upcoming show is that we want to do good, but sometimes doing good, it's counterintuitive, because if you are doing everything for the other person, then you're taking away their agency, and it's not sustainable. So, but if you do nothing, then you're actually not supporting them, knowing that there are things you could do. So the question is, how much can you support them without taking their agency away and then making them dependent? Which is, it gets to the whole thing in America with, social. We don't want to have everyone living off of the social system, right? That's the big myth. If you're unable, and then you need food stamps, you're living off of the government, right?
Welfare
queens or whatever the terms
yeah,
are that
yeah,
they use. Yeah.
yeah. Well, you just described relationships 101. I mean, as far as how much, if I do too much for them, then I'm enabling.
Yeah.
If I do too little, then I'm neglecting.
Yeah.
And I'm down with that conversation, because this phrase that relationships take work or marriage takes work, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but how much? Because at some point we're keeping it alive by false, like keeping a dead person alive by
Under false
machines.
pretense.
Yeah, well, it's just machines. It's false.
Yes.
And so
I mean, I
all
always
this
say,
hard work.
you've heard the phrase 100 times over. I always tell Ronnie we're one day away from a divorce.
Yeah.
And by stating that, it keeps us together, because nothing goes unsaid. We don't let resentment come into the relationship. And then there's something incredibly healthy about that, right? And
Well,
yeah.
and that's where I was going with that. Modesty culture is rape culture, because it just goes from resenting and blaming to violence. And so what I hear, and the reason that when you said, okay, the topic's going to be authenticity, it's just another way of you saying to you and Ronnie's little pact that you've made with each other, is that I'm not going to keep stuff in. I'm not going to bury stuff under the rug and pretend it's not happening. I'm going to be authentic.
Yeah.
But
you know what the challenge is in relationship is that one individual's authenticity is another person's attack. And that's where it gets really funky, because I could tell you how I'm feeling, and I can tell you I've been in the middle of so many crosshairs, so many of these discussions.
Yeah.
I'm really having a hard time. What do you mean you're having a hard time? I didn't do anything. And like, it has nothing to do.
They took it personal.
Yeah, they take it personal.
But listen to the language that you're saying. So one person's authenticity is another person's attack. Well, what if a woman's authenticity is wearing a low cut blouse?
Yeah.
So that's her being authentic, but to him, it's an attack.
Yeah, of course, because that's where that individual hasn't yet created enough consciousness to make it otherwise. I mean, that's the sad part of life.
And this is where responsibility is a big deal, is that instead of thinking that their behavior or their statement or the way they dress is about you,
yeah,
it's not about you. and I mean, I don't know how to relate that. Earlier, I was thinking I related that to responsibility.
Well, you related it. I mean, all of these topics have dovetailed because it connects to codependency. Of course, to the degree that I need you to be something that you're not, then I'm going to be resentful to you when you don't behave the way I want you to.
Yes, attachment to outcome.
Yeah, and so I think when I was doing my course, the 15-month course with Bambos, and I said the second or third unit of the course was what I would call the helpless no, is that I say no without blame because I have to be helpless that you might not come to me. Because if I say no and I attach that you need, like I'm forcing you, like I have to be resolved that maybe when I say no, you're not going to be able to meet me where I want to be. Like that's
I don't have enough context to know what you're talking about.
Like,
what are you saying no to?
What I'm talking is that if I say no to a behavior, so a lot of times I'll be working with a couple.
And it's a soft no, did you say? Or what kind of?
It could be a soft or a hard no. I mean,
well, what you said, you gave it a metaphor or an adjective, a soft no. It wasn't.
Oh, it was helpless. The helpless.
Helpless.
No, sorry.
Helpless no. Yeah. What's that? What is that?
The helpless no is, so I'm together with a partner and we get into fights over and over and over again, the negative reinforcing loop. And then one of the two partners starts to gain awareness that this dynamic isn't working. And then they start to alter it. They start to ask more questions. They start to be more vulnerable. They start to not take the bait each time the statement's thrown at them. And what starts to happen is that creates a big tension in the relationship. And then at some point, this one individual who starts taking more and more responsibility, getting to your point, they start to say, not through resentment anymore, but through how far am I ready to take responsibility now?
Yes.
And at what point do I say, listen, I would love to, but I'm sorry, but this is as far as I can go. And then that's what I'm saying is the helpless no. I say, I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore. And I'm not going to blame you. I'm just saying this isn't going to work for me. And I'd love for it to be otherwise.
I understand all of that. I just don't understand the word helpless, because in a sense, you're taking back your dignity.
You're taking back your dignity, but you have no control of the outcome. your
Well, sure. Oh,
dignity.
so you're
Yeah.
helpless. Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
helpless in the outcome. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for
Well,
clarifying.
yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
it could be pedantic, so I agree with you on one level. You could say, well, you're not helpless because you're taking all your agency back and you're holding yourself and
But
the other person accountable.
you're deeming yourself like um it's a no with your hands up.
It's a no with your hands up. Yeah.
So um I'm really interested in that because in my own life I have relationships to where I'm 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 keeping I'm keeping a relationship, I'm keeping this friendship open, and as opposed to leaving and just saying, okay, we're done here.
Yeah.
And I'm keeping it open, even though I know, like what we said earlier, that I know that person is spiteful
Uh-huh.
and resentful towards me,
Yeah.
and because they're blaming me for some of their behavior.
Uh-huh.
But I see that they are making attempts and actually steps towards responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I'm not leaving. The relationship is worth seeing where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
And my next question to myself was, at what point am I a doormat? I mean, at what point have I, has surrendered my agency and dignity? And I just asked the universe, because I journal to myself all the time, and I'm asking myself, okay, I would like to have something concrete to think about, to reference when behavior is coming at me, and when I know that's it, that's enough, that's all I'm going to take, and what's going to be that measure. And the thing that I came up with, and I'm it's so fresh I may not be able to verbalize it, is because I'm tempted. I'm, like you said, take the bait. I'm tempted to make it about, okay, all right, you drew first blood, okay,
Yeah.
and I get pulled in to that. And so by saying they're blaming me for that, and you know what, I did play a role in that, and so whatever ownership I need to make, responsibility I need to make to be healthy, I want to do. But there is a point in which you're casting more responsibility on me than is actually mine, and I will not own that. And I don't, somehow these are just navigating relationships.
I mean, I know it. I have. So first of all, when I started taking responsibility in my own relationships, what I noticed is that I got far fewer friends. So the friends dropped out. It was almost like, oh, I've got like 30 years of cleaning out my closet.
Mm-hmm. Like the cleaning up your Facebook.
Because you know that you've been in dysfunctional codependent relations, people blaming you for not calling them back immediately, or people saying, hey, what you're writing is offensive, and interpreting everything that you didn't write. Like, you've got those relationships in your life. And so for me, at first I was like, okay, like, I'll let this unfold because I see I can create more space. But at some point, like you said, I became far less tolerant because I thought, I don't have time for this anymore. Like, I just don't have time. And I think the loving act was loving me finally, because in a way I could self-sacrifice for forever to find a way to make it work. But then the question was, do I feel fulfilled? Do I enjoy this? And fewer and fewer times I was enjoying it. And what I started to see was, I didn't need to blame them, nor did I need to blame myself. I could just say, this isn't working anymore. And I think we have a whole show that I dedicated to what I called it personal versus impersonal, but then I switched it around. I called it the one thing you need to know that solves just about everything. And
that'll sell.
And that was a one thing. And so if you're going to watch that show, but the one thing is, when is it that actually it just is? It's the isness of things. Like, even my emotions are isnesses, because I think people, of course, we know when you attach to your emotion, then you are that. And then you, like we said over and over again on this show, you resent and you blame the other person for the way they made you feel. Where when you observe the emotion, and then that emotion just becomes a thing like a cup or a tree or a house, you're like, oh, that's going on, that's there. And I think that's where that freedom lies, because now you can utilize it. It actually becomes very, very beautiful in a relationship. The same thing, like, the one story when I was a kid, in the book, it, you've read it, but when he would talk about my mom, he was so coarse and horrible. He'd call her a cunt. And it was like the hardest thing for me to hear because she meant everything to me in my life. So it was only after I like went and did my own work and saw, oh, his world is his world, mine is mine. I'm not codependent. I don't need him to talk about her in a way that I now feel okay. So that was that moment. I remember it very deeply when I was in Amsterdam. We hadn't met in 10 years. He was here and he said, your mom was a real cunt. And then I looked, and the reaction before would have been a fight where we would have separated for another few years.
How dare you talk about my mom?
How dare you talk about my mom? And it shifted to, she's been gone so many years. What's going on? Why are you still holding on to it? And then he just cried. So we went from what would have been an argument into him crying. Yeah. And we became closer through this weird way of saying, I'm not. That word, which I would have attached to the woman I made into a saint in my head, was gone. And now I could just be with him, with his suffering, because I didn't need him to deal with any of my suffering. I kind of, dealt with that mostly myself.
Sneaky.
Yeah, but I mean, but it's not a trick.
I know.
No, but it's nice you say that because actually, at some point, you have to have made peace for it to be authentic, getting back to the real word again. Right. Yeah. Because if he felt any inauthenticity, he was very keen on that as well. I can tell you, he could sense really quickly when someone really wasn't genuine, and that would have triggered him. And then he would have gotten aggressive in another way. Right.
Yeah. You've seen this phrase, people, I saw what you did there, And it'd be funny if he goes, I see what you're trying to do. Like I'm onto you, but that's what I meant.
A ninja move.
Right.
Yes. Ronnie, by the way, does that to me all the time at home. So she in fact, what she's getting good at is she's doubling down. So if I react a certain way to trigger response, she'll react to make me think that she took what I said seriously in a way that tricks me. And then it's just the best. It's just so much fun. So she's learning to manipulate the manipulator.
So the spouses, the partners of therapists have all said at some point, don't you psychologize me, don't you?
Oh, I would never psychologize her, by the way.
No, I know, but
I would say something to trigger her. Like, oh, baby, we'll just go to the airport at the last minute. Don't worry about prep. It'll be all fine. And she knows that would never be acceptable. But so she'll say something like, you know what? That's a great idea. Why don't you just pack whenever you want? That would be her response. Yeah.
So I know we're out of time, but a couple of things just came up I want to toss in.
Yeah.
So please. I know that you probably have feelings about this, but this is what came to mind when you were talking about that an emotion comes up for me.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm finding in my life, and then I can see it in others, of course, is over-identifying with that emotion.
Well, over is a judgment. I'm always sensitive to judgment. So I just say identifying with it.
Okay. Yeah. As far as I've even like something positive like empathy, like I'm feeling empathy. I think a person can get wrapped up in like, well, I'm an empath or something, and that could be a pitfall, I think.
Yeah. Well, what you're saying, by the way, I love how you're talking because these are all. Since I'm doing my daily walks, I come up with titles for new shows, and then one thing, the next show was The Trap of Labels, because what you're talking about, and we sometimes touch on it, you'll hear it when you're doing the edits, but I'm always talking about when do we identify with the thing to the point that we can't no longer see ourselves anymore? Because it's almost like I hate those assessments when you fill out the assessment and then in the end it says you're an introvert or you're an extrovert, and then all of a sudden your entire life is explained and you can justify everything the rest of your life. Oh, this is just who I am.
Yeah, right? It's the same with the zodiac astrology.
Astrology, yeah,
and then the enneagrams. I mean, all of which, but so for the person that, and I'm sorry, I just got to find a better word than over-identify. I guess just on the person that. I mean, it's okay to. That's why I want to put a metaphor on it, or not a metaphor, a modifier on it, because if I take that test and it kind of points to me and says, well, you're this, I know that there is some context when that's possibly healthy.
Oh, of course.
However, what I hear and what I think is the over part is that in a way that's put a ring through your nose, and now you're going to be led around by it.
Yeah. So, but let's agree, it's not about Myers-Briggs and all these things. They're not bad. They're great.
Right.
And you're pointing it
Enneagram.
out. It's the context.
Yeah.
So it's the point at which you no longer see it as something that can inform you, but you all of a sudden identify it as it is you. And then from a personal development, a coach or a mentor role, it sucks because what have I given them? I've given them every justification they have to resist me now, because they can say, you know what, that's just not who I am.
Yeah.
Look at my Myers-Briggs report. It shows that I'm not that person. And so you're fighting something that's support. Now, let's agree that these things are indicative of behaviors that are being pointed out, which is valuable. And let's also agree, if you're in a business and you're just trying to get quick answers, how do I deal with this person in a way that's going to be most effective? Like those assessments, hey, they cover up for someone who doesn't have empathy. Because if you don't have empathy, basically this report will give you empathy, because you'll say, oh, I shouldn't use these words. Oh, okay, that's not coming from me. It's coming from this other logical data-driven system. But in the end, it's not the thing that's bad. It's how we use the thing that's bad, right? That's always the case, or not always, but often the case. Yeah.
And they weaponize the Myers-Briggs against, So I know one last thing.
What's that?
When you were saying clean out your closet, or like, go through your Facebook friends and say, these are the people that I'm going to have less people in my life. The more responsibility I take for my life, the less friends I'm going to have, etc.
Yeah.
So there was a thing that came up on an episode of one of my shows where she happened to be a therapist, but she pointed out that a lot of organizations and clubs and even relationships have this tension between authenticity and belonging. And so, for example, in a lot of churches, because the human being desires to be seen, that thus they desire to be authentic, and they desire to belong, because we're pack animals, and we desire to belong to a community.
Yeah.
And when that community sets up expectations and parameters of what makes you a member or not, then that's what creates the tension between makes the person choose between authenticity and belonging, because they can't have both. If you're going to be going to be authentic,
slow down. That was beautifully stated.
Well, let's just think of a church that's real snobby, or
I'm with. So you're saying, and I just want to rephrase this. You're saying that authenticity is going to compete with belonging if you need to form and reshape who you are in order to belong.
Yeah, and that would be if the bylaws, so to speak, of the organization are such that no gays are allowed, or it's to the extent which they set up parameters and filters. That's the extent to which you might have to forfeit authenticity. So what you're wanting, and what we're wanting, and by establishing just this description of what happens in society, is we're wanting those relationships, those organizations, those clubs that allow me to belong while I'm being fully authentic.
Yeah.
Those are the friendships you want to keep. Those are the clubs you want to be in, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's beautiful. I didn't think about this. I mean, it's kind of, it's obvious based on everything we said, but you put it in such a succinct and beautiful way. Is that I forget, because I always think I get to work in so many different locations, and when I go, I kind of have to be a bit of a chameleon. Yeah, right. When I'm in Indiana, my cussing goes down immediately, because there's a lot of the Methodist religious groups in the background, and I know, wow, there's a lot of people here that have strong ideas. I did a session in Borneo, and I said, Jesus, what are you doing to me? Or something like that. And then the woman came up to me afterwards and said, Andy, please do me a favor. Never use the word Jesus when you're, and I didn't even think about it. Right? I didn't think Jesus. I have no equation of him. And then the next day I said, oh God. And then I said, oh my God, I said that. And then I went to apologize. She said, no, Andy, it's okay if you say, oh God, you just can't say, oh Jesus. And for me, it was like, how do we delineate the difference between these two? But the thing being is that as soon as I was now forced to bring that to consciousness it altered my behavior, because in some ways I didn't want to offend.
Mhm.
Why would I? That would be me offending for the sake of wanting to, like, see me. This is who I am. Like, I'm over that. But to some degree, you're right. In belonging to that group, I needed to let go of certain things, ways I might be. And I mean, in even doing this show, you can imagine there's going to be people watching it or thinking, God, what a, Andy, he's not the Andy I know, whatever that might be.
Yeah. And I think, to go back to the original theme of this show, is that when you're in that particular town, and you're refraining from using the word Jesus, that you are still being authentic, right?
Yeah.
It's
That's
not
authentic.
Yeah. I mean, it's even though you in your own convictions don't give a damn about saying the word Jesus, you're going to honor the parameters of this particular club. Yeah. And because you want to be there.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the metaphor that Dan Savage uses about the price of admission to the amusement park. Is that so let's say, I just, a second ago, I just set up a kind of a idealistic thing to where it's like, okay, the only friendships or clubs that you should be in are the ones that allow you to be 100% authentic and allow you to belong. And no, there's going to be relationships and clubs and friends and whatever that you ask yourself, okay, I can be myself to the fullest extent. I just can't take the Lord's name in vain when I'm with him. And that's the price of admission.
That's the price of admission.
And so you look at the rides, you look at the Ferris wheel, and you look at the roller coaster, and you really want to ride that roller coaster, and they're asking $5 at the gate.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's worth it to me, $5 to ride that.
Yeah.
The thing about it then is you get in there and you ride the ride, and you can't complain about the $5.
No, you cannot complain about the $5. I am so with you. Like, that's like,
shut up.
That's what I say to everybody, is that I don't care what decision you make, but make it consciously. And when you've done it, it is what it is, and accept it. And if you move out, you don't blame a damn person. You can't live with that regret.
It's responsibility.
Yeah, I was really funny. I know we're way over, but I share another story just because I think it's so beautiful. I went out with a friend of mine, and then we met another friend, and we had this beautiful lunch together. The friend that joined cried because it was just, we were connected. It was it was just honest, beautiful, totally. We were all emotional. And then I leave, and then a week later, I get the message that the person who was vulnerable felt violated.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
Because they weren't prepared to be that vulnerable at the table. Yeah. And then I was thinking, wow, I felt very close to them, and I didn't, nothing was spoken that wasn't, it was just intense for them to share, but there was nothing provoked or pushed. It was just, hey, this is just the honest question, like, so what made that you guys ended up getting together, or whatever it was. And then, that must have been hard. So they felt seen by me. They felt heard by me. And the fact that it was an honest question, which they may not have been asked in ages by anybody, was created an emotional, visceral response. So now a week later, I'm told that basically because of how I made them feel, I'm now responsible for that, getting to where you kept pointing to in the conversation.
Yeah. And that oversharing and the afterglow of, like, every time I'd finish a show, even back when I was a preacher and I'd finish a sermon, there is that feeling of like, oh my gosh, did I overshare, or did I let the emotions of the moment manipulate me into doing something that I now regret? And that's kind of what they're feeling. And of course, instead of taking responsibility, they're blaming you.
Yeah.
But it is common for people who aren't used to being vulnerable to come away from a meeting like that where they've been vulnerable and feeling exposed.
Yeah.
And now they're scared and naked, and they've got to blame somebody.
Yeah. And you think the best thing would be to sit there, at least to call the person and then share it as well. That's a vulnerable act that connects you again, so you stay in relationship.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's a lot of ways to react to that. Just call them and say, I am feeling really, really exposed. I feel, I don't know if it was the drinks or I had too much to drink or just the lighting of the restaurant, but I'm not comfortable with how much I shared with you.
Yeah. Well, the judgment was something different. Is that It was it was an underlying belief. This isn't the conversation you have in a restaurant. That was the
Well, then
statement.
don't have it.
Exactly. Or say, but whatever the case was, I just thought it was very fascinating that, again, then the belief comes that, hey, there's only certain places where you can have emotional discussions, right? Which is, of course, its own belief that goes unseen, which is part of life, as you know.
Well,
Yeah.
and if they know you, if they have any history with you, they know that they're going to have to be the ones to know what's appropriate and what's not, because you're gonna talk about anything and everything, anywhere and everywhere.
Yes,
like because nothing is expanding the untalkaboutable or whatever.
Or seeing a clue which shows that that's not appropriate and then pulling back, because the thing is, if it goes again to the trap of authenticity. If you think the conversation needs to be authentic, then you're actually not. You're actually, there's a drive in you that you're not aware of. I don't need an authentic conversation. It's just great when it's there, and why wouldn't I continue? And if I think or appears there's space, hey, I'll dig into it. So.
Well, you do it on the show sometimes, but I remember that time you were in the backseat of a friend of yours parents' car, and you just said, "How's your sex life?" and here again, that's not somebody could say that's not the conversation to have in the car with the parents of your friend at age 9 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm saying is that when people are with you, they're going to have to know that if they want to put parameters on these conversations, they're going to have to be the ones to do it, because Andy doesn't know how.
But you know what? Like the person, and it's always context. That person who we spoke in that story, right?
Yeah.
I'm still very close with that person, because there was a vulnerability that he could feel, that he wasn't anxious. It was actually a high school teacher. I was a high school student. I was with him and his wife in the car. And so there was, and it was really funny. There was a genuineness in it, because I actually saw these two. They looked so weirdly different to one another. I said, I can't imagine the two of you having sex. And it was an honest feeling. It wasn't like, it was just, and I guess and of course, there was the idea like this is also pushing the limit. But the thing was that in allowing yourself to be that free, people will also meet you as he has, and he's become a friend for life. So, so in that way, there's you ride the line, but people who appreciate you for showing up completely, even if it's a little bit raw and a bit weird, you stay friends for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it's a different level of friendship, I have to say, because you cut through the bullshit so quickly. There's no superficial necessity. You might go through that, but at some point there's like, we can deep dive as soon as we want to, or it feels good, or we don't have to, that's that feeling.
Well, it sounds like he's willing to pay the price of admission to the relationship with you.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder if he feels that way. Yeah. Well, listen, we came way over. This is going to be our longest show ever, so I'm happy you can edit it down to a reasonable size for listeners.
I'll take out everything I said.
Hey, listen, share this with people from Everyone's Agnostic, because I'd love to get some of those listeners to join over on our side.
Okay.
We can pull them over when we've edited this one down, or even the video. Yeah. Thank you, Cass. It was really cool to be with you. I see that Bambos was at least strong enough to watch the video, so I see he's at least has the health to watch the video. Bambos, we miss you, and I can tell you it feels very weird not having you next to me, having an hour-long show with Cass, but it's beautiful to be with him and you separately, right?
There's nobody in the world like Bambos.
No.
He's one of a kind.
What my greatest fear with Bambos is one day he's going to heal all of his wounds and we've got nothing more to talk about on the show.
Well, that'll be a great day.
It would, wouldn't it? That'll be the last show. At one with everything. That's what we'll call the show. Listen, I love you, Cass. Thank you. I'm really grateful to have you with me. We'll talk soon.
We will.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.